Hey everybody, it's RPG Gilmore. Happy 4th of July. I figured today that I would do a loadout video for my tanking spec, and we'll just get right into it. I'll try to keep it as short as possible. The gear set's pretty easy. You just want to mainly. I usually just put all gigantics in all my defense slots. It gives you all the defensive stats you need for it. You don't really need a high defense stat. See, I'm sitting at 12k um, and 5k deflect. That's with not really even trying. And it's more than enough survivability. This is actually more of a power share build. As you can tell, it's got anywhere from 27 to 30k, and that's without your uh, pet procking. But first off, I will go through the gear. I am using the face set. It gives you the AP recharge, which helps you keep your Shield of Faith up. That's a pretty big deal for this build. Um, it's the easiest way to make your character survive. And like I said, it's whatever you can get in these, whatever the highest gear sets you can get. Um, I do run the protector set. It gives you the three-piece set gives you a lot of HP. It gives you 10k HP. But also the cloak gives you 8 AC as legendary, and then greater plated band of Constitution gives you plus 4 con and a lot more max HP. You can put whatever utility enchantments into those that you feel like. I just have random ones thrown into them for right now. And then Waters of Elizad, because it's a little better for tanking than either the Lantern or the catalog, but uh, if I had to choose any of them, it'd be between the Lantern and the Waters. The catalog's just not that good. The Sigil of the Devoted. Once again, it gets all your AP gain back and keeps your Shield of Faith up. Uh, Sigil Oathbound Paladin. You don't have to have this. I just have it for the max HP and power. The AoE resist is negligible and not really that important. And then the Eye of the Giant. I prefer this because it gives us the HP, power, and the armor pen. Yeah, the defense is nice too, but the armor pen's the big thing, so that our abilities actually produce enough threat and hit hard enough to say so. And then for rings, I am running a sudden deflect because of that double defense slot, and a ring of Dodd. Um, this is just for the power mainly, because we do have the double offense slots, and it also with the dark and demonics, it gives us a lot of armor pen. And now to the stats. With this build, all you need is Con and Charisma, so those are the two you want to max out. If you on your rolls you don't get the max Con, that's not a big problem. You probably at a minimum want 28 Constitution. So as long as you hit that, you're more than fine. And you get pretty high AC with this build, so that helps too. And we don't need history. Alright, for powers, Radiant Strike's always on L2. This just gives you that little bit more armor pen. and it even gives you a damage increase of 5%. So it's really, really good for this build. Um, Plus, when you're hitting packs, if you just keep hitting this, it's a little better than using like Oath Strike or Shielding Strike, depending on the situation. Um, I just had 3 points on Valor Strike. It was just to get down to the next skill. Burning Light is good for when you're clearing mobs and dungeons. It's generally what I run, um, just to clear groups. Divine Judgment is on our L1 triangle. It's just a really high damage effect. It does have a small area, but it produces quite a bit of threat when you use it. You'll always have Aura of Courage because it buffs the entire group's damage. It's so useful that there's no reason to not run it. And you're pretty much always going to have the highest HP in the group. Uh, Sacred Weapon, I do have 4 points into. It, when you're a protection paladin, this thing does massive amounts of damage. Well, single target damage. So this combined with either O Strike or Shielding Strike, you just create so much damage and threat with it that it's just that valuable to have. And I'd highly suggest it. Heroism, we just had 3 points to get it down to a farther level. Bane is extremely good when you're tanking stuff like the Dragon Turtle boss, um, or like in MSVA. It reduces all the damage that the target does to you, which helps with our survivability, especially those very hard-hitting bosses. Um, like if you're a new low-end level 70 paladin tank, this is also pretty good for Orcus to help survive with the hits. Aura Truth, same thing. It helps us survive with the Dragon Turtle and in MSVA. Um, so that's why it's maxed. Aura Vengeance doesn't really get used in this build. It's just a filler to get to the next tiers. O-Strike is maxed out. It hits very hard. It even forces a target to actually attack you. So it's very, very good with um, single target. But if you got multiple targets, like I said, I tend to use Radiant Strike more. Templar's Wrath, this is the very first thing you're going to want to get to 4 points. It is just that good for us. It just gives us a whole ton of extra temporary HP. And then we got Aura Wisdom. There are situations where you want this because our powers get maxed out. And the faster you can get your powers back, the better it tends to be. Binding Oath it's not always a must-have. It really depends on your gear score and what you're running. Um, you so you don't always need this, but it's very nice to have. Or protection, I really don't use much. Shielding Strike, I do use this quite a bit against the Dragon Turtle, and even against Orcus, uh, because you don't really need Oath Strike against Orcus, because what I normally run is Shielding Strike and Sacred Weapon, and Sacred Weapon gives us that threat anyways. And then we have Shield of Faith. This is the other must-have, personal or daily, and it just gives us so much damage reduction, and it lasts, I believe, 6 seconds. No, 12 seconds. And by the time that you need it back up, your AP gain should be high enough where you can just immediately pop it again. So you get this basically every 12 seconds. Divine Touch. Once again, it's another when you're just new to level 70 tanking. If you use this with Binding Oath and Valve Enmity, or not Valve Enmity, sorry about that. Templar's Wrath. It helps significantly with your ability to survive. Your Binding Oath doesn't hit you as hard, so it doesn't drop you down quite as much if your power sharing isn't that high, so you don't do as much damage to get the high amount of temporary HP from Templar's Wrath. I do have 4 points in Valve Enmity. I don't really use it in the tank build very much, but it's just filled to get down to the next level, I believe. Absolution, don't really use it much. It's just filled because I had extra points at that point. Same with Divine Protector. Aura Radiance does actually help hold threat, especially in bigger groups. So, that's what I normally run as my second aura. I don't use either Relentless Avenger or Aura Valor. Avenger pushes all the targets apart, and I don't really like doing that, especially when you are a Tankadin, you are trying to make your all the groups tightly packed. So I just don't use it very much. Circle of Power. It can be used in place of Bane in some situations, because at some points you do want the damage resistance over um, uh, the damage reduction, which they're slightly different from Bane, um, and Aura Solitude. Uh, doesn't get really used. I just had extra points, so I threw them into it. Uh, this is the reason I chose Tiefling for as a both a healer and a tank. Is that you get Infernal Wrath, which gives you a 10% chance to reduce their power by 5%, which is pretty significant. It's a lot of damage reduction just from that. And then Blood Hunt gives you the additional 5% damage to targets below half health. This helps us hold threat just that little bit better at the bottom portion of a boss's health. And then Oath of Protection. This is where a lot of, you wouldn't think of it, but a lot of our damage comes from. Because you gain power based on how much damage you take. And it caps out 10% of your max HP and power. And if you remember, we have 172,000 HP, so that's 17,000 more power. Based on how hard we get hit. And that's another reason to have a little bit lower defense and deflect compared to what a Guardian Fighter tank would have. Alright, now to the feats. Obviously, toughness is a big benefit to us. 9% more HP is just that good. Divine Action we have 5 points into because it gets us that AP regen faster to get our dailies up. Exemplar's Haste, it just gets our encounter powers back that much quicker. I do have 1 point in Wrathful Strikes. You can kind of switch it up between your Divine Call and Wrathful Strikes. It's more of a personal preference. but I prefer getting the Divine Call back faster, and I'll explain that why in just a minute. And then Steadfast, 5 points in Constitution, or 5 points into it gives you 2.5% more max HP for each point of Constitution. Uh, Once my belt's legendary, I'll have 32 Constitution, so it's a fairly significant amount of HP gain from this. And then I will go into Light Tree since it's shorter. Just 10% more healing. It's more beneficial because we don't have any true heals in this build. So the just outgoing healing from this is much better for us. Warrior's Bastion, just 10% more defense from our equipment. It does help pretty significantly. Uh, we don't need the defense as much, but with some of our mount powers, you'll see why we want the extra defense just for that little bit. And here's the main reason to go into light. We share 25% of our power. And once I'm fully in combat, I get my companion up and everything else just based on my self buffs. I tend to have around 52 to 53,000 power, and so that means you're sharing 25% of that. So that's what 12,500 power that you're sharing to everybody in your group. And for 10-man raids, it's just that much better. Now into the Justice. I choose Bound by Light. It helps us maintain threat a little bit better, so I just go with that over the little bit of the movement speed on occasion. Flash of Light. This helps our allies get their encounters back faster, because the faster the enemies die, the less damage you end up taking overall, so you're less likely to die. Radiant Champion, it's more cooldowns and even movement speed, so it helps your entire group. And same thing as Flash of Light. Echoes of Light is how we get a lot of our encounters back very quickly, and it's quite significant how frequently this triggers, so I highly suggest 5 points in that. Here you can choose either Purifying Fire or Prism. I went with Prism because we have boons that deal damage based on our healing, or whenever we get healed. So this actually ends up being a little bit bigger benefit than the Purifying Fire. And Vengeful Judge, this is why I prefer Impassioned Pleas over the Wrathful Strikes. You get an effect on Judge when you use your Divine Call. Increases your damage by 35%, reduces all your currently cooled down powers by 35%, and they have a chance to, your encounters have a chance to immediately give you a Divine Call back. So it's just, I wouldn't call it an infinite loop, but it's a fairly fast loop of using your encounter powers. And yet another reason we don't need a ton of recovery, because our encounter powers are generally always up. Alright, for the boons, this really depends on your guild. For the tank, I do run the Armor Pen. It allows us to get enough damage through our enemy defenses to actually maintain threat. For the defensive boon, usually defense is the first one opened up, but eventually, once my guild has it open, we are going into the I will go into the hit points. Utility, it's pretty much whatever you have open. I just went with the XP gain. And my guild isn't big on PvP, so that's why none of these are unlocked. Alright, from Sharendar. We actually want the 400 power over the 400 defense, just because that's what our build is. I also want 400 deflect over crit strike. We do not need crit strike at all in this build. Here, you could actually choose either one, but I prefer the AP gain, and it just gives us our Shield of Faith that much quicker. Elven Tranquility, this gives us a heal, which can trigger some of our other boons. And Faith Thistle, whenever you deflect, you do 3,000 damage. That's why I go with the sudden deflect over like sudden defense or any rising defense or anything like that. Because it just gives you that little bit more damage when you do deflect. Alright, Dread Ring. 250 power and movement over crit strike. Lifesteal over regen. Regen's really not that important for this build. Once again, deflect chance over the armor pen in this case for that more survivability. Enraged growth. With this, you heal up to 20,000 points, and at the end of it, you get a 4K defense buff. This is just another heal for us, and this is why. It says your healing spells, but it's any healing effect. And it does 2,000 damage in an area, and this helps us maintain threat on stuff. And then we have Icewind Dale. You'll just go straight across, and that gives you 400 AoE resist over combat advantage. Incoming healing over stamina gain. 400 recovery over crit severity. Cold Shoulder, it reduces their the next time you're hit by 2,000 damage, which is slightly better than power gain based on our guard. And then Rousing Warmth, because we are healed so often, we actually get this buff quite frequently, so it's just extra damage. The Underdark, 400 power over defense, lifesteal over crit strike. In this case, I took regen because this is the only case where it's better is because combat advantage doesn't benefit us at all. Shorter control durations by 5%. And then I just took Abyssal Strikes. None of these really benefit us that much, so I just took the more damage. Tyranny of Dragons, once I have this fully open, I'll go through those, but for now it's 400 power over the 1600 hit points. You can actually choose either one, so that's just personal preference. Deflect over crit strike, because we don't need crit strike, period. Here I will probably actually take the armor pen, because it gets a little more threat generation for us. I'll take lifesteal there, and this one, let's see, any of these three would actually be fairly reasonable for us. We don't really need the lifesteal. I guess we don't really need crit severity either. So it'd be between revival and grip. I'd probably take revival just in case. Maze Engine, lifesteal severity over income and healing. Shorter durations of control effects on you is far better than 400 combat advantage. Action point gain, same thing, way better in stamina. And then with engine inspiration, same thing. We don't have healing spells, but we do have healing effects. So this can potentially heal our entire group for 20,000 HP. And nothing else in here is really that great for us. Elemental Evil. This is actually the main campaign you're going to want to run because it gives you so much HP. But in this one, it's 300 power over the 2k HP, 4% lifesteal severity over regen, 400 recovery over crit strike, and then wall wind. Once again, this gives us another heal over time effect, and at the end of it, you get 1,000 recovery, so your powers recover for a little bit quicker. Storm King's Thunder. I went 2% in control resistance over lifesteal severity. Income and healing over stamina gain. This, since we're taking damage all the time, it gives you an extra 2,000 damage on your next attack. Same thing, it's better than a stamina guard gain base effect. This one, it's an easy choice. It's 3,200 HP. That's just a significant amount of HP for one boon. And then in the final tier, I put 1 point in each of Chill Winter, Healing Warmth, and Frozen Reflection. Deflection, because we do deflect a decent amount. Our deflect gets up to about 33%. So a third of the hits we take get deflected. So that'll give you extra damage. Healing Warmth, because we are healed all the time, this will do a AoE damage effect for 4k, and that'll help us maintain threat. And then Chill Winter, every time you attack a foe, you get a stack of it, and at 10 stacks, it deals 10,000 damage to enemies that are close to you. So overall, I just split 3 between the 3 powers because the only benefit to going deeper into them is a little bit extra damage. And then Cloak Descendancy. I went Aura of Hope. Aura of Despair really, there's not really a good situation for it, so I don't use it. Here, it's your personal preference. If you need more incoming healing, you can take that. I don't really need it at this stage, so I use the crit severity for when I do crit. Here, you just want the recovery. And then on the 4th boon, you can choose between the deflect boon or when you get hit by a foe. This will do 10,000 damage. I prefer the one that gives a heal because of our boons that trigger off from healing effects. So we would get more damage abilities. And that was one thing I wanted to go back to and explain as far as why we have the weapon enchantment we do. Is Holy Avenger. This actually procs a heal every time we attack, and with Radiant Strike or our Shielding or Oath Strike, we actually produce a heal effect. Well, if you used your daily, either Divine Judgment or Shield of Faith, it procs Prism, and when you get a heal off your Holy Avenger enchantment, it heals your entire group. It triggers your boons that actually deal damage based on your heals. So it's a nice little combination where you heal your group give them actually more damage resistance, and it generates more threat in the entire process for you, and it just helps you maintain that threat better. For companions, I have the Paranoid Delusion. It's not really necessary. You can put a Dread Warrior in here. You could get a what's the other good tanking one? You could use a Frozen Galabdur. It's really personal preference. I just had mine at Legendary, so that's why I left it in my actives. Here we have Beer Can, our faithful little owl bear. This actually produces a lot of damage for us, and with that damage comes a lot of threat, and that's why he's there. I do use the Death Slad, and you wouldn't think it, but the 12% actually procs fairly frequently, and from what I've seen, the poison hits for about 2100 damage a tick. So if you stack that up to 4 times, it gets fairly significant on bosses. And then this is our main companion that I use. It's got lots of power. It's got a decent amount of armor pen and recovery. And with that, it just makes our power sharing that much better. And our powers come back a little bit quicker when our bondings proc. Um, and the extra damage buff helps too. I do really need to upgrade this, but as it is, he's more than sufficient. And then I use the Earth Archon. We are generally always at full HP, so we get that damage bonus. And he does have a nice amount of defense, but I don't run him as my primary companion because we prefer the power share. And then, like I was saying, you can have the Frozen Galabdur if you're noticing you're having a hard time taking the bigger hits from like Orcus or the Dragon Turtle or Druffy or Svartbolg. He does help out with that. And that should be it for companions. Alright. Uh, in the stable, we run Assassin's Covenant. It seems kind of counterintuitive for a tank build, but because we get so much benefit for power sharing, it's worth the decrease to our defensive stats. This, whenever you use your artifact, you get a significant amount of action point gain, which is the primary reason I run it. And you get a decent amount of power off from it too. As you can see, it fluctuates, but it's around 1500 to each of those stats, which is fairly significant. Gladiator's Guile, this helps us get to our targets faster before our allies do. Protector's Camaraderie, this is just another power share bump for us. So every time our Air Archon attacks, we're getting a stack of this, and we can get up to 12% more power, which it's a fairly nice amount into our power sharing. And then Wanderer's Fortune is just to get more refinement materials. Alright, and now I'm just going to show you a little bit of kind of an example of what I do for just for soloing at least. You can run either Oath Strike or Shielding Strike for soloing. And I'll run the shielding strike. We're not going to need to produce any threat. We'll pick up our daily. And we'll just do secure the area, why not? Now we just need to find a pack. Oh, here we go. The rotation I generally use is I use Radiant Strike, Templar's Wrath, and then Blinding Light. You don't really need anything else, and then just Radiant Strike to finish stuff off, if there is anything. And that's just how fast we kill stuff in this area. Let's see if we can round up a bigger group. There's 6 enemies. Same thing, Radiant Strike, Templar's Wrath, Blinding Light. In dungeons, you'll Radiant Strike and then use Binding Oath, and then Templar's Wrath. But for trash mobs, you just kill so quickly. You don't even need Binding Oath. Let's see. Let's find a tougher group. Let's see if we can find some adventurers to kill. So I can show off our Divine Judgment. Oh, well, I'm looking for another group. Some other races that you could potentially use that are actually really good for this build. Dragonborn is actually very good. The only downfall is you get the critical bonus, and you really don't want to crit that much with an owlbear companion. Human actually works very well as well. It gives you more points in your divinity, or not divinity, into your feats, and it just makes it that much easier to actually get your wrathful strikes at max out and keeping your impassioned pleas at max out. But as you can see, even as a tank, you do quite a substantial amount of damage. And surviving was easy. We didn't get controlled by anything, and I'm not gonna worry about any of this stuff. But well, let me know what you guys thought, and we'll collect some up here. And if you liked the video, please like, comment, and subscribe.